to the event. Yeah. So it's started now live on YouTube. I don't know if you see this notification on your Zoom. Yes, maybe we can also start even if it's only 1 minute to 6. Yeah.
I think, Sanela, we can start.
I just have to send one message to Riyadh, okay, and then we start. Okay, then we start. Dear colleagues, dear students, dear authors, and dear participants, thank you for joining us this late afternoon for a presentation of the book Voices from Srebrenica, Survivor Narratives of the Bosnian Genocide, and a discussion with authors, our dear and distinguished colleagues, Anne Petrila and Hasan Hasanovic. This book has been published recently, but it has already attracted international reception and readership. There were several online book presentations, I would say at most prestigious American and European universities. The book has also been officially launched in Srebrenica during Genocide Memorial Days, and we are really humbled by this opportunity to present this important and moving book to our academic community. So thank you all once again for being with us. I would also like at the beginning to briefly introduce two amazing persons that are behind this, this book, the authors of the book, Anne Petrila and Hasan Hasanovic. I had the privilege to know Anne and work with her since years. She is a social work practice teacher at the University of Denver, where she also serves as a coordinator of global initiative and maybe for our context, more importantly, as the director of Global Practice Bosnia, a project under which she since years brings a group of students from Denver to Sarajevo for doing internship and engaging in community work. And when she was on her first visit to Sarajevo, I was asked to prepare an introductory lecture on Bosnian society, politics, and welfare for this group of students. And that is how I firstly met Anne. In the meantime, I would say our professional cooperation has broadened and deepened, and beautifully friendship grew out of it. And therefore, I was really happy when I saw that she has taken her interest in Bosnia generally and in Srebrenica particularly to another level, and has, in co-working with Hasan, produced this at the same time wonderful and also sad book. Hasan Hasanovic, I think, is not a person that should be introduced to Bosnian public. He is one amazing man, a survivor of the genocide in Srebrenica, currently acting as the director of research at the Srebrenica Memorial Center in Potocari, and has participated in many, I cannot count it, national and international events, occasions, and spoken on the topic of Srebrenica genocide. Today's event will be moderated or co-hosted by two of us, my dear colleague Sarina Bakic and me. And we are also very glad that our Dean, Professor Tucelo, has accepted our invitation to give one introductory address. So, Professor Tucelo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanela. Good afternoon, all of you, and good morning to Anne. I would like to extend a warm welcome to book launch, or better, to the discussion about the book Voices of Srebrenica, which is co-authored by, as Sanela already said, Hasan Hasanovic and Anne Petrila. Why this book is important and why that attract the attention of actually academic community throughout the world. I would say that the narratives of the survivors of Srebrenica genocide have been, to a certain extent, neglected by the memorial culture in Bosnia-Herzegovina, or memorial culture of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and that the oral history as such has been neglected in past 25 years when we speak about the experience of Srebrenica genocide. And as I said at the conference that was organized by the Srebrenica Memorial in the Birn in Srebrenica about the oral history, it's quite important to have the survivors to speak about their experience of genocide, about genocide itself, about their experience, how they live with that and with death, with both of them, because they are as living with this trauma, and there are, and it can be seen as from the book that there are so many traumas as there are identities of the survivors who deal with it. And I'm sure that today's discussion about the book will give us as new insights into the Srebrenica genocide, new insights in how the authors dealt with the fact that they have to listen to the trauma, which is quite hard to, for the people who actually, even for Hassan, who experienced this, everything, and especially then to Anne, who probably it was her first time to listen to some of these survivor stories. And of course, I'm sure that this book, together with some initiatives to introduce oral history into our curricula at different levels, will be a contribution and will encourage the respective ministries or universities to think about it. Thank you, Hassan and Anne, for joining us. Thank you, Sanela and Sarina, for organizing all of it, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Sanela, just turn your mic.
But several weeks off and I forgot the first rule of Zoom, unmute yourself. Okay, thank you, Professor Turčela, for your support and also for your wise words regarding and your emphasis on the importance of survival narratives for a better or in-depth understanding of Srebrenica genocide, and also what its impact, long-term impact on individual and also community level. And I would like now, maybe I should have told that in advance, that the book for now can only be purchased online. But on this occasion, I would like to shortly present its content. So it's written on more than 200 pages. It has a foreword written by Emir Suljagić, whom I also should not present, who is also well known in our context as a columnist, as writer, as politician and political activist, and currently the director of the Memorial Center of Potocari, and himself also survivor of genocide. It has a preface written by Anne, one introduction, and then in terms of structure, it actually consists of 9 chapters divided into 2 parts. The first part, which is called narratives, and the second part, which is called aftermath. The first part, narratives, actually in a form of storytelling, gives voices to 9 male and 1 female survivor of genocide who share their personal, intimate experiences of mass executions, of Dead March, of how it was to be a survivor from the UN base. Followed by 3 testimonies of female survivors, of mothers, Hajra Čatić, Nura Mustafić, and Saliha Osmanović. And interestingly, and also to me as a reader, a bit surprisingly, this section also entails interviews with human rights activists from Serbia, Žarko Kovač, Staša Zajović, Sona Biserko, and Nataša Kandić. The second part of the book, entitled Aftermath, discusses issues related to response to genocide in Srebrenica, ramifications, responsibility of international community, and the last chapter is on lessons learned, if we have learned anything. So in a way, I would say the second part actually provides a contextual background for testimonies which are presented in the first part, as it addresses a wide range of social and political issues related to genocide, which are actually relevant for contemporary understanding and contemporary imagination of those survivor narratives. And therefore, my question to both of you, Anne and Hassan, to enter this discussion would be to share your personal motivation to engage with this topic in a form of the book from the perspective of survivors, and also to share eventually your some of the challenges you have faced on this path.
Hassan, I think you should start.
So first of all, let me thank Sanela Basic, and thank you for the wonderful intro, and of course, thank you, Sarina Bakic. My special thanks go to the Dean Sea Turčalo, who I have shortly met in Potocari during the oral history conference, but sadly had no time to talk to him, and both of us were in a way busy, but I'm sure that in future there will be some opportunities where we will talk. Thank you for organizing this book launch and for presenting our book to your audience. Let me start with the explaining, why and how everything started. I met Anne 10 years ago. She started bringing groups to Srebrenica Memorial. I remember a couple of those first years when she brought students, and I was always wondering, what and how she taught students. And she told me what subjects she taught regarding Srebrenica. And I offered her to come to spend a week or two with me to go from one place to the other. I offered a tour of the execution sites, and also I offered to meet some of survivors and some well-known figures, because I understood that what was needed for her was to actually touch the very base of the genocide in terms of knowing all of these people that I've actually mentioned. So she gladly said yes. She accepted it, and then every next year she kept bringing students, and after I think 2 or 3 years, she offered me to assist her in organizing her program in Srebrenica, and that's what I did. So we've been working for about probably 7-8 years regarding her program, which I tried to contribute how much I could. I remember, I think 7 years ago, or 8 years ago, probably 7 years ago, I was in my office and had an idea to write something about my own experience, and had no any experience nor skills, writing skills, of course. And I was complaining to Anne, my hesitations, and she said to me, if you don't start, you'll never know. And that's where everything actually began. I was preparing for my first important trip abroad, which was London, first remembering Srebrenica's Memorial Day 2013. That's actually that was the day. That year actually was the first year when Remembering Srebrenica started its activities back in London. So then I started to write, and I thought nobody would like it, or maybe my story is not that interesting, or but I trusted Anne, and I also sent the writing to some people who in a way liked it, and had some, of course, propositions, some objections, of course. And then when I was in Scotland, I met a wonderful people at the Interfaith Scotland after that, and they helped me to publish my memoir. And Anne was not part of it because she was very busy with other things, but she was very very involved and helpful in all the encouragements, and she was actually the only person which actually talked me into writing it. So then afterwards, I thought, okay, there is this small memoir, which is not big deal. It's it's very humble, small memoir. But I also wanted later maybe to do something else, to work with somebody who is international on the book in English, which would explain what happened. And I always understood that the personal narratives, as Dean Sarah Turchell said, oral history is the most powerful, most striking. If you include oral histories of people combining with the actual facts, that's what our book should be about. And I remember we visited, it was, I think, 6 years ago, we visited the execution sites. We have this annual visit on July 13th every year, Mothers to Srebrenica, or 3 buses, one from Sarajevo, one from Tuzla, and one from Srebrenica. We got on those buses and we go around these sites. And I offered to Anne to go with me, and because all those visits were so emotional for me, and sometimes even devastating. And having a friend there would be always helpful, and especially somebody who is, who has such an amazing heart as Anne does. So she accepted it, and I remember we were in Pilica. Pilica is a place which is 65 kilometers from Srebrenica, northwest of Srebrenica, on the way towards Bijeljina, some 25 kilometers from Bijeljina. 500 men and boys from safe UN haven from Srebrenica, who were either captured in that march or separated in Potocari, were assembled somewhere and brought to that cultural center and killed inside. And that was the place where my father was killed. And I remember, Anne was laying a wreath with a friend from Potocari, also lives. Her name is Alma. She also lives in Denver. And Anne was crying and sobbing, and I knew that she cried because of me and my father. And then she sort of asked me, if there was a book on these accounts, on survivor stories from this place. No, I only knew there was something from the ICTY. It's like a small booklet from the outreach program, and that was it. There were some survivor accounts, but not from, which wouldn't actually embrace all of these sites, only a particular story of an individual. So then we, in a way, said, yes, we will try to write that book. At the beginning, we wanted to write about everything, all the facts, all the stories of every particular execution site. And I started collecting sources from the ICTY, from everywhere, and it was a huge, I would say, ocean of information, which was very difficult to deal with, to sort out. Then at the beginning, we had a problem even picturing the image and the structure of the book, not to mention, how the book looks today. But there were so many challenges, and one of the biggest challenge was how to structure it from the very beginning. My idea was to have first part, which would be factual part, dealing with the verdicts. I read all the important verdicts. I took all the important information from all these major verdicts from the UN Tribunal, and we used Google Drive to stock information, in I don't know how many places there. Then by time I kept adding people, I would say we need to interview this man, this woman, and at the beginning there would be always a problem explaining to her why, and at the end she always said yes. And I know her so well that she would always say yes at the end. And that was as you, Sanela, said about the human rights activists from Serbia. I always knew, okay, these are these stories of us, of survivors, and these are the facts as well. But people will say that me as a co-author, I'm not objective because I'm a survivor. My book is my story is there. I am the co-author, and Anne is close friend to me. So I said to her, we also need, as sometimes academia says, the other side, which I said to her, we should have these human rights activists from Serbia, who I all know personally. We should not and cannot go to interview Šešelj or some other people who are deniers or revisionists. We should go ahead and interview these people who are well known and respected worldwide. But I said to her, you should go, but I'm not going to Belgrade. You can go, you can hire an interpreter, but I'm not going with you, because for me, I used to go to Belgrade as a kid to a school excursion to visit the Tito's grave, but I never later went there. And to me, everything in terms of the war, everything that happened to me came from Serbia, came from Belgrade. And it was very difficult for me to say, yes, I'm going there. I said, no, I'm not going there. And then some time passed, and my brother, who is a journalist in Bosnia, who is well-known journalist, and he's very brave because he usually does the war reporting and the corruption reports in Bosnia. He works for the federal TV as a reporter, and he said to me, "You should go," and I was not ready for that. And I don't know, something happened, and I said to Anne, "Okay, I think I'm ready to go." I took some pills, to calm me down, because I don't know how I'm going to feel when I cross the border. it's not that I'm not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of perpetrate, or I'm not afraid of people who would attack me. But it's just that general feeling, the overall feeling. So when we got there, we met with Žarko Korać, who was. There is no need for me to tell you who is Žarko Korać, who was really an amazing host. And then we met Stasha Zajovic. Then we actually met Sonja Biserko in Sarajevo. She had a book lunch in Sarajevo, but we also had a coffee in Belgrade. Then we eventually met with Natasha Kandic at the end. So that day was really amazing, and we had all those interviews that we needed for the book. Then to come back to one of your questions, Anne said to me once that she would want the world readers to learn about these amazing survivors and see them the way she sees them. And that was one of the reasons why I said I want to write this book with this woman, because she really feels and profoundly understands the story and has a heart for survivors. I think we managed to put that heart in the book thanks to Anne. And I hope that I had my own contribution, even though there were situations where I was not available. When she needed me, I remember when we had when we were in the Finnish, I was in Scotland. I spoke in the parliament in Scotland. I had speaking engagements in schools over there, and in prison, in the most dangerous prison in Glasgow. It's called Berlini. But I remember Anne would call whenever I was available. She kept calling me, wanting information about this, about that, and I was not always. And this is what I'm in a way a little bit sorry, and I don't know how many times I apologized to her, but that's what the life is. So I think the book is very unusual. It's of course special book. But I think we invested 5 years of our lives, invested energy, knowledge, research, and one of many qualities that Anne has is very detailed and dedicated work. Like if I would say, let that go, she would say, no, let's check it out. Let's, and I think now, we are not afraid, and that people will find something which is not checked, which is not researched, and I'm really glad that we had over 10 book launches at very prestigious places, mainly in the United States and some in Europe, and hoping to have some in-person book launches back in the United States. We are actually working that I go at the end of March and the beginning of April there, if possible, if the situation allows. And of course, apart from memorial, I would like to thank you, all the three of you, who organized tonight's book launch for us. I would like this book to be translated in Bosnian, and of course, I would like you guys to be involved somehow, because I can see that you are here with your hearts, and thank you for that. So I think Anne should take the floor, and yeah, thank you.
So thank you for your kind words, my friend, Hassan. And Hassan did a really thorough job of describing how it all started, the emotion involved, the struggle involved. Anyone who's done anything like this understands that. The scope, which was initially far too large, and the different discussions about what we were going to do. And it's very fresh in my mind because just this morning, I have to say my computer was starting to get a little funky. And I thought, ooh, I need to do what I had planned to do a while ago, is to get every single thing connected to this book off of my computer and into the cloud. So I did that. And I was just sort of laughing actually to myself, seeing all of the iterations that this book took. And so I guess I would just add a few things to what Hassan said. And that is that I think, Sanella, you said perhaps something like why it was important to do this, or the motivation to do it, or something similar. And as Hassan said, we were at these sites, these execution sites, and it was an incredibly a situation where there was just incredible raw, intense grief, as you can imagine, primarily from the women who were there, who had, many of them, not been to these sites before, and it's where their male relatives were held and killed. And so it was just an extraordinarily difficult time for them. And a couple of things happened. One is, as Hassan described, my thought about only people who have the opportunity to come there can hear these stories or learn about this. And the other thing that really stuck with me was my question about whether I should have been there, because I was standing there in the midst of this incredibly personal, horrendous grief, and in a place that was not my story and not my culture and not my country. As much time as I've spent, and as much as I see Bosnia as my other home, it's not my story personally. And so I really struggled with that question, and always do, and always talk to my students about it, whether they're working cross-culturally here in the States or whether it's abroad, or that how do you assume the necessary stance of humility to be able to work and be with people, and also how do you partner with someone whose story and culture it is, in order to learn from each other. And with this book, I've done that with Hassan, Sanel, I've done that with you, with students for so many years. And so that was a big part too for me, my journey with this book was always trying to check on that, of the ethics involved, the ethics of myself being involved, the ethics of how we were interviewing people, that question of the healing nature of storytelling, but also the re-traumatizing nature of storytelling. I worried about Hassan in the process, because while it was very difficult for me, and as the dean said, it would be, I actually had heard these stories many times in some form or another, because I'd had the amazing privilege of knowing some of these people for a long time, but I'd never heard these stories like this. And I'd also never been, side by side with Hassan on a journey like this, with all of these different stories. So it was a very, very unbelievable privilege to write this book with Hassan, to meet with the people that we did, their generosity of their time. We met with them all over the place, wherever they wanted to meet, and which again, in terms of cross-cultural work, was very something I had to get used to, because here in the States, we would never have had conversations that we had in Bosnia in a public place. It would be very unusual to do so. Maybe we would have, but we were in lots of cafes, lots of parks, lots of homes, all sorts of different places. So, and Hassan already mentioned the whole thing about going to Serbia. And as he said, he always had the idea that we should add more people and more chapters and more ideas. And he's right. I always said we couldn't, we didn't have time, we didn't have room, we didn't have, and then I always said yes, that we should. And then he was always right. We should have done it. But going to Serbia, I had no intention of going there without him, because he's the reason people talk to us, as he should have been. And also, I just thought, we're doing this together. So if he is unable to go, then we'll just have to sort something else out. But fortunately, as he described, he was able to, with the help of his brother, convince himself to go. And it turned out to be a really, really amazing day. And also, I think, gave a good perspective to the book that we wouldn't have otherwise had. So, so I guess I would say that I just always have known and seen and experienced that something which will be very familiar to everyone, certainly on this panel and many people listening, is that people, everyone has the right to tell their own story if they choose to, in their own way. And history should be told and recorded by those who lived it. And it so rarely is. It's so often, the privileged and powerful people who are able to tell the history of whoever we are. And often the voices of those whose really experience it was, they're lost. And so that was really such an important part of this. And I was surprised that everybody that Hassan asked to be part of it agreed. And he wasn't at all surprised, but I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. And then as we interviewed people, as we said, it was so difficult for them to do this and to talk about their experiences, and we gave people many opportunities to stop, of course, and either stop completely or reschedule, but everybody wanted to continue, because as hard as it was for them and as painful as it was for them, they really wanted their stories to be told, because they want the truth to be told, especially in the face of all the denial that happens. So that probably one of the hardest things to do, and we accomplished it as best we could, but we're not always as successful as we wanted to be, is that we really wanted to have people, if they could, tell their story in its entirety, like from all parts of their life, from when they were young, from later, and not just focus on the tragic atrocity part of their life, because one, it's not fair to do that. There's so much more than that. And two, it's very difficult for anyone to just read atrocity after atrocity, of course. And so we tried as best we could to talk with people about what their dreams had been for their life when they were young, and all of the different aspects. And some people were able to do that more so than others. For some, it was just very difficult to talk about anything other than those years of really tragedy and sorrow. But we did our best to present, again, people in the way they wanted us to, and with their stories of what had actually happened to them and to their family members who didn't survive. But we also did our best to present them as we know them, as Hassan said, as these really incredible, fun, courageous, interesting people. So thank you for being so interested.
I would like to give out my firstly personal thanking and respect to Anne Petrilla and Hassan Hassanovic for giving us this extraordinary, very powerful and significant set of personal stories of survivors of Srebrenica's genocide. This is important contribution, in my opinion, not only for our society, but to the whole world as well, bearing in mind that this book is written in English. And before I ask my first question, let me underline that our aim, together of us from the Faculty of Political Science, University of Sarajevo, with this scheduling of this promotion, is actually to speak about Srebrenica and Srebrenica's genocide, not only on July 11th. So, dear Anne and dear Hassan, I will ask you something different. I'm interested in opinion of both of you. What is actually your standpoint on today's increasing culture of denial? I thought that if the time is passing by, this particular damaging and very harmful set of values and patterns would disappear, would fade away. But it seems to me it is getting wider, it is getting stronger day by day, as I said, times is passing by, particularly among young people. I'm asking this because a lot of our students are listening to us, and they would be glad to talk to you about opinion of yours. What are the causes for this such a strong and long-living culture of denial when we speak about Srebrenica's genocide?
And should I go first or? Yeah, I mean, it's a really complicated question. One of probably the most complicated questions we could get. This book has been also written to tackle denial. It's as a tool, and the memorial to Chari will, I hope, develop more of similar tools to tackle on the ongoing denial, which is really dangerous. The problem behind this denial, and the question is why it is being denied, is very, I would say, complicated. I think, in my opinion, it's because the Serb elites have not given up on the heritage of the Greater Serbia, of Slobodan Milosevic. On the contrary, they've been doing everything to cover it up, conceal it. They do everything to explain the reasons why it's the opposite. They created actually in an environment the whole culture of denial, which is really dangerous, where the Karadzic, Mladic, Milosevic are being celebrated as heroes. They teach in school curriculum. They teach young people that Serbs in Bosnia, for instance, had war for liberation, self-liberation of Serbs, and they've done nothing wrong, and all sides are more or less equal in terms of war crimes, etc. And you know all of this, and basically they're trying to cover up the past. They don't want to confront with the past, because probably Serbian Academia of Arts and Science, Serb Academy of Arts and Science, probably they told the politicians that if they start to talk about the past, if they start to confront with the past, it would endanger the existence of the Republika Srpska as an autonomy of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we all know how it had been created. The 95% of locations of mass graves are actually on the territory of that autonomy, which actually speaks everything, tells volumes about how that autonomy had been created and why. And we are still looking for over 1,000 victims from Srebrenica genocide, and nobody wants to tell locations of mass graves, even though they know. So I have a feeling that it's a part of the plan of Serb elites, and they are giving instructions to the current politicians, the current political establishment in Serbia and here. Everything is run from Belgrade. I always tell students in Potocari or visitors, when we talk about reconciliation, when we talk about transitional justice, I always tell them that, of course, about preconditions, prerequisites for reconciliation, but I always tell them something which is, I think, is the key. There were decisions that had been made by politicians during the war to commit the actual war crimes and Srebrenica genocide. So the same thing applies to this. We would need certain political decisions for these processes, for the process of confrontation with our past, process of reconciliation to start. So when Belgrade, when political establishment in Belgrade decides to confront genuinely with the past, then we will go in that process. Then ordinary people living in Bosnia, living in Srebrenica, would find a way to go forward. We are not going to move forward unless there is a political decision made those who decide on our lives. As simple as that. And what really worries me here, that question, why they are, why responsibility, or maybe to guys.
It's okay now.
Yeah, I froze for a moment. I'll repeat. I say that question, why, is it because of two things: to hide the responsibility, and they always hide behind the collective responsibility, even though the ICTY held trials, individual trials, but they always had pictured those trials as trials against the entire Serbian people. And they actually go with this narrative to cover up Milosevic's legacy and Radovan Karadzic's legacy. And the second thing is, are they doing that to because they want to maybe do it again in future, to repeat an aggression against Bosnia and war crimes and the genocide, which in a way really worries me. And the recent political statements coming from high-ranking politicians in Serbia tell me that we have to be vigilant. We have to really be on guard in terms to not to let this go easily, and to also work with our international partners and let them know that they cannot be sleepy. I think the whole of this time, throughout our international community is on standby and doesn't want to do anything in this process of transitional justice, reconciliation, confrontation with our past. So I think they should be not just mediator, but also to lead the process. We know from the experience from Germany after the Second World War that the justice had been imposed there, that the Germans had been made to confront with their past. In this case, in Bosnia, the Serbs in Serbia, in Bosnia, and elsewhere were left to voluntarily on their own to, if they want to confront with their past. Of course, they didn't do it, and we are now stuck in I don't know where, and we cannot move forward because of that situation. I find the international community very much responsible for this situation, and I really hate to hear that mantra. It's up to local politicians to, find a mutual agreement. And we know what Dayton Agreement is all about, and decision making, and all the obstacles, the veto, and all the things. So as if they don't preach to the choir, and we know, we can read, we know, and they are telling us that they are not responsible. During the war, they failed Bosnia, and I think they are also failing Bosnia now. I think this book, The Story of Srebrenica, this book, and many other things are very important, not just to tell them what happened during the war, but to also to remind them of their responsibility after the war and now, and for future as well. Sorry for taking up this time, but it was, I think, one of the most, for me, the complicated questions one could get. And you're all professors, so I'm in a way preaching to the choir, and
we want to hear opinions of both of you. So that's the point of this meeting today, of this promotion today. And
so this issue of denial is, as you all know better than myself, in that you live with it both in Sarajevo and in Srebrenica and elsewhere in Bosnia, it's one of the most damaging and dangerous and in some ways puzzling issue, but not so puzzling really, because when you think about why would somebody deny what is obviously true, and whether it's that somebody individually has done something to one individual to another individual, some sort of interpersonal violence or something, and the person who's been victimized says this happened and the other person says no, it didn't. And then, you know, there's that whole kind of scenario, and then there's this like times a million. And so as I see it, you know, we do what makes sense to us or benefits us. And so, you know, I mean, clearly some people who were very involved in this deny that they were, because it's to their advantage to not have been involved legally and all of those things. But the part of it that is so interesting and concerning and damaging is what I see as actually a part of a bigger culture of denial in terms of what is happening, certainly in my own country, what is happening elsewhere, what is happening specifically in Bosnia, about, in spite of scientific evidence, video evidence, every kind of evidence, there are still people saying, whether it's about the genocide, whether it's about something that's happened here, whether it's about that, no, it didn't happen, even though everyone has seen that it happened, there's proof that it happened. And that dangerous culture that has sprung up in so many places, just to say it's not, you know, it's not true, fake news, all the things, it is not true. And so, and as Hassan, you know, spoke about the political organization and that structure and sort of thing that keeps that going. But the other thing that I think it keeps it going, and that's where it's so very dangerous. And one of the reasons we wanted to write this book, and in terms of people telling their stories, is that when there's a culture of denial, it makes it easier in ways to keep us separate from each other and to not have to feel like so responsible or even engaged in it. For example, if I'm sitting here in the States and I read something or hear something about Bosnia, but then I hear, well, you know, it really wasn't so bad. It wasn't as bad as the Holocaust. It wasn't this, it was both sides. It was, you know, that whole false moral equivalence thing that happens. And so then it's easier for me then to say, well, okay, then I guess I don't really need to learn about it. I don't need to care about it. I don't need to do anything about it. And so that is one of the biggest dangers, I think, of this culture of denial. And one of the best ways to combat that is by doing something that connects people more, that doesn't allow there to be this distance or this lack of caring. And oral histories and people talking in such a way that you can't help but connect with each other is a really, really good way to combat it. Because then, you know, people get hooked into, oh, wait, this person is like me, or this person should have the same rights as me, or this is a mother who cared about her child the way I do. And so there's so many reasons denial exists, in so many ways it needs to be combated. And the way that I feel like I can contribute is to do whatever I can to form a connection between people across everywhere, because then we feel an obligation, as we should, to do something about human rights violations.
If I just can add one sentence, which is to me very encouraging, is the fact that the story of Srebrenica worldwide is growing. It's not diminishing, as many had thought. Usually there is that saying in Bosnia: if once we don't have burials, once we don't have the actual victims to bury, there's not going to be an interest for the story of Srebrenica, which is not true. When it comes to the world, the story of Srebrenica by day is growing. The interest for the story is I think it's very similar to Holocaust, you know, which kept growing for many years. And going abroad, I can tell that it's really the case. So I think, you know, with the work of Srebrenica Genocide Memorial for these past years, since Emir has been the director, I think that interest will just grow, will create more content. We interviewed 219 video stories in oral history. With colleagues, I developed oral history methodology and the questionnaire. So we'll continue with filming. So I think this year we'll add another 100, and in upcoming 2 years we'll probably add around 500 more of these stories. So I think one of the best ways to tackle denial is oral history, and this is why we had that conference, which is the first historical conference. We are now collaborating with the Shoah Foundation, which will help us to index 500 oral histories, and to actually have the whole package, not just indexing the video stories, but also transcripts, translations, and all the things, and actually putting some of, I don't know exactly how many of these stories on the platform of the Shoah Foundation, where there are video stories, oral histories of all, not just the actual genocide, but all subsequent genocides, and there is no even one from Srebrenica yet. So now we are putting subtitles for 2 interviews, and probably in a month or less, we'll send them first to video stories of oral history. Both of those stories are 3 hours, so 6 hours. One is is a male, and the other one is female. So I think these are the tools one of the tools how to tackle the ongoing denial, and we have to create our international partners who will help us and exert pressure on their own politicians, and to actually narrow the space for the deniers in the Balkans, mainly from Serb environment.
Thank you, Hassan. I think Sanela has a question.
Yes, thank you. This issue of denial will stay with us for long, I think. It's not one easy issue. It's a complex problem, as Hassan has told us. And what we actually see, the societies are usually not good with admitting to genocides. We only now witnessed that French government, for example, admitted being complice in Rwanda government. And we witnessed that, for example, Turkish government even today denies that they committed genocide over Armenians 100 years ago. So it is a story that we should work continually, the issue that we should work continually on, as Hassan already has given some examples on how they will, from the Memorial Center, address this topic. But I would like us to go a step back, because I really I'm really touched by these survivor testimonies, which are a crucial part of the book. And they're at this time, I would say, the most painful and also emotionally the most demanding to read, even to us who are actually used to every sort of violence and trauma, and who are a kind of expert by experiences. So all those people you have interviewed survived atrocities which are actually beyond human imagination, beyond human comprehension. And while reading, I at the same time admired deeply their capacity to present what happened to them in ordinary language. So more often than not, when I read a passage from Passage and confronted with this extent of evil, with this extent of pain and suffering and loss, I got really lost. But what is striking at the same time is that those testimonies are also the most powerful examples of resistance and resilience. And this resilience, in my understanding, is taking place in a social context, in one environment which is not only not responsive or empathetic or supportive, but is also very resistant and reluctant to accept, which makes it also even more impressive. And therefore, I would like to ask two of you, can you reflect on the sources of resilience, both at the level of individual, but also at the level of collective? And maybe Hassan, from this insider perspective, how you see it, and maybe from the outsider perspective, how it looks to you as someone who is coming from a different, not only country, but different continent.
Should I go first, or?
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, I can tell you my example, you know, and I remember it was 2003. Before that, I was a student. My life was normal. I used to be an interpreter, and it was, you know, normal life. I tried to forget. I did everything to forget. But 2003, I went to bury my father. I remember I was with my mother, my girlfriend, who is my wife now. We came to Bratunac. And as we got off those buses in Bratunac, they actually told us to get off those buses because there was a traffic jam in Potocari because Bill Clinton was inaugurating the memorial. And there were over 50,000 of attendees. And they wanted to, you know, to make sure that, you know, not less people get there. And there was CNN and then BBC, and all eyes of the whole world were in Srebrenica that day when Bill Clinton was there. And I think that was the turning point in terms of this story to get on the international stage. So we got off the buses, and what was striking to me was that on the side of the street, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of local Serbs. There was a long line of police officers in front of them. In my understanding, they tried to stop physical contact between us and them. And we started to walk from the buses towards Potocari, which is about almost 2 kilometers. As we started to walk, from that crowd, they were calling names, calling us Turks, yelling out unbelievable insults, spitting on us. So I was being spat at even by war criminals who were in that group. While I was going to bury my father. And you imagine the amount of anger, anguish, pain, what was inside, which I could not understand at the time. I knew that I was only very, very angry. Then I buried my father. 2 years later, I buried my twin brother, which is the most, of course, difficult, maybe one of the most difficult days in my life, because I had to put his bones in the actual grave with my hands. In our tradition, as you know, I was the oldest surviving male, so I had to do that. And after, I honestly thought that I will not be able to survive that burial, which I did. And if somebody had told me then that in just like 4 years, I would be able to get back there and start work for the memorial and tell this story to the whole world, I would tell him or her that it's impossible, because I was both physically and psychologically destroyed. And I thought, for me, the only way to survive the story is to come back to the source of pain, which is that place. And I simply wanted to try to cure myself, to help myself by working there, and also contribute to the country and the world by just being there as a survivor and telling the story. So I turned all that trauma into, I think, my own cure, even though at the beginning it was more than difficult. This is why I understand how it is for survivors when they, for the first time, when they tell the story, in our oral history. Now I'm trying to be with them, trying to talk to them, try to support them, because I understand how it was for me. Believe me, for those people speaking for the first time, most of them, they think that they will not be able to survive the storytelling. That's how dangerous and devastating for them to tell the whole story. Then, yeah, I spent another 11, 12 years telling the story and speaking internationally, and this is basically that resilience coming, from my own example. I'm not there, and I'm not in Srebrenica because of the fact that I need a job. I mean, who would want to work there? I mean, in common sense, it's a place that nobody would want to work, especially when you are a survivor. But my motivation is everything. The story that my twin brother, my father, my uncle, and all of those victims. It's just enough to stand in the cemetery and think for a moment. Then you're energized. You get the energy. You get enough motivation to move on. Without, even if you're not happy with other things. So the same thing applies to other survivors who have some other jobs, or who are, some even of them are abroad. The reason for telling the story is obvious, because they want to contribute, and they want to make sure that the story is not forgotten. They want to contribute to the collective memory as well. And the fact that the mothers lost the entire families, all their sons and their husbands, and they live sometimes on their own in Srebrenica, in some village. They return there, not just to come back to that place where they used to live, but also to show to the whole world, that their loved ones once were there, that they existed, that they are remembering them, that if they can remember, if they can be still alive, they can be, and they are, to me, amazing teachers, and sometimes take students to some of these women, especially to Saliha Osmanovic. Sometimes students have so many problems in their own lives, and they bring those problems back from the United States to Bosnia. So when they visit people like Saliha, they see that their problems are almost irrelevant. So they basically go back home enriched with knowledge, and they basically change their own lives, and which make the story make them stronger, and in terms of dealing with their lives in future. And also they carry on this unbelievable experience, who they will cherish and to the rest of their lives.
I would just add a couple things that, Hassan's example of his own experience and his motivation to do what he does, and his sense that he needs to do what he does, is something that I saw, again, from the outside looking in, with everybody that we talked to in this book, and everyone actually that I know throughout Bosnia. And that and these survivors in particular, what I was so struck by was their sense of duty to tell this story, and their gratitude to be able to do so in a way that they felt like might reach a broader audience. And because of their actually very consistent across the board belief that they survived so that they could tell the story, and that they had to tell the story for those who didn't survive. And that sense of obligation. And also what came through every single time was just the incredible importance of family and family connection and obligation to family. So that's what I would add.
And I have, in the context of cultural memory, of cultural remembrance, we are all curious on how actually is the scale of cultural memory regarding Srebrenica's genocide in the United States of America, particularly in academic discourse, for example. Who else is working on Srebrenica genocide. Can you tell us? We are really curious about it. And of course, a little bit of touch of public discourse on cultural memory of Srebrenica in the United States of America. Thank you.
Well, you know, the United States of America is an enormous and varied country. And I would say that I have a skewed view of how much people know about Srebrenica, because in Denver, a lot of people know about Srebrenica, because I think almost 300 students have come to Bosnia to learn about Srebrenica. Certainly in St. Louis, where there's the most largest number of Bosnians outside of Bosnia who live, there's an incredible knowledge about Srebrenica and about Bosnia, just in terms of the whole culture, and not to mention some academics. I would say it's a small but mighty group of academics who are interested in Bosnia in particular, but also in genocide. I mean, it's a pretty, pretty specific kind of area of interest. The thing that always strikes me, though, is that the students that I have, even those, because I have just graduate students, but even those who as undergrads majored in genocide studies or mass atrocities, of that, many of them did not learn about Bosnia in their undergrad major on genocide. And so I think that we have a very long way to go in terms of increasing education. And I think, though, the time is now, because we talked a bit ago about lessons learned. The lessons learned about how this unfolded in Bosnia, in Europe, and how it was, the hatred was fueled, and how all of the tools that happen to get civil society unravel, basically. I mean, that is happening here as well. And we're in some ways in a really precarious position of hatred fueling things that are very terrifying, and especially because of having had a hate-filled leader who had the highest pulpit in the land. So I think that it's interesting that people, in my experience, are now more interested, sort of cross-culturally, in looking at these issues of how does this happen? How is it race relations in this country are as they are? How is it that these genocides have happened? How is it? So I think that there's momentum, but it's small, quite honestly, and among academics as well.
Thank you. But as Hassan said previously, the need to know more about Srebrenica genocide is going to be bigger a part of this when we take care of institutional forms of culture, of memory, such as Hassan is here with us, the center, Memorial Center Potečari Srebrenica. So maybe you wanted to say something also, Hassan, on this question.
Yeah.
Actually, let me say one more thing, Hassan, before you go. And that is that one thing I should have mentioned, that the recent movie that came out about Srebrenica that was nominated nominated for the Academy Award. And while it's perhaps not a perfect movie, what is, but that movie has done what I was hoping it would do. It has really, really elevated the whole discussion about Srebrenica. People now they know how to say it now. They know where it is. They know where Bosnia is. So that's very encouraging. Okay, sorry, Hassan.
Now, I have been talking about this for many, many years, about the strategy, the need for having the strategy, if you would like, diplomacy for Srebrenica genocide. That we have.
Hassan, you froze again.
Yeah, I did, and I stopped for a moment before when it goes away. Yeah, so I always said that there is a need, and there is still that need of having a group of lecturers, survivors, probably a combination of both lecturers and survivors, as sort of Srebrenica genocide diplomacy, who we intentionally send abroad, especially to United States, to visit all those many countries there, and to sort of create the network there of with the academia there, and that's actually what we need. I think I know the most of, together with Anne, we know the most of academics who deal with Srebrenica genocide in the United States, and the number is really small, and probably Anne is the most active academic back in the United States, and there are some others, but they are not that much efficient as she is in terms of delivering the results. So I hope that the memorial with somebody else would create a group of professors and survivors who also need to be educated and need to be trained how to speak. You know, when you send somebody to speak at the university, it requires certain skills. So I think having this group of people going from one country to the other, and it should be sponsored, it should be financed. When Dodik is financing the denial of genocide with millions, and we don't do anything. We are just waiting for Srebrenica Memorial to do something, and it's been 2 years since Memorial does really great job. But what about all of those years in the past, all 23, 4 years of silence, complete silence on all levels. On all levels, there were individuals like Hasan Uhanovic, Emir Sulegic, and some others who were visible in the world in storytelling and lecturing, and that was pretty much it. And there was no institutionalized contribution for Srebrenica genocide. And I think it's not late. It's now Memorial tries to gather people like you, like Seat Turcelo, and our professors who can really contribute that we create the world's network of our partners who will teach their students, because I think those people are ready, and we need to offer them curriculums, programs, educational packs. We need to go to reach them if possible. Not all of them are able to come here because everything is about money. It costs money to come to Bosnia, especially from over the ocean. For just one person, it's too much. Not to mention a group of students. But I think it is possible with the social cohesion and sort of organization. I think it's possible to
networking,
and we have to have this network, this group of people who will go out there and I mean, there are people like Jews who we can learn from, and they've done unbelievable work in remembering and institutionalizing the story of the Holocaust. It's of course important to pray and to everything, but we have to work first.
I agree, Hasan, completely with you. Sanela?
Yeah, I would also like to thank also Hasan and because from their answers, I realized that there is a lot of space for improvement when it comes to public knowledge about what happened in Bosnia and what happened in Srebrenica in US, but also in European context. I did my master in intercultural conflict management in Berlin, and we worked on ethnopolitical conflicts on 3 case studies: Israel, Palestine, Rwanda, and Bosnia. So which shows that the progress can be made. But maybe we should also, as Hasan told us, be proactive. Also as academics, because we have, for example, a large Bosnian community in some parts of America, and we also have something which is called Bosnian American Academy of Arts and so on. We also have Fulbright program and Fulbright scholars coming also at our faculty, and maybe those links we should use and create energy in order just to spread the word and maybe miss some gaps that you have mentioned. My next question was actually related to the impact of storytelling on survivors, but both of you already answered that question in two of your previous answers. Therefore, I would go to another topic, which is also important, or which I have learned from your book once again, and it is related to your aftermath section, where you talk about grief and trauma, and also intergenerational trauma. And I worked a little bit in that field of intergenerational trauma, and I learned that the concept was very difficult to define, and you come across various definitions, and you see that some authors define it as the loss of communality, as the destruction of social fabric, as a loss of social trust. And that actually places the experience of trauma on the dynamic individual collective, which is then crucial for development of collective trauma. And then you can also speak about this its capacity to be transgenerationally transmitted. So keeping this in mind, Hasan, I thought a lot about it, but I would like to learn from your experience, and I would pose these questions very directly. Do you think that genocide that you have survived will have a long-lasting impact on future generations, and in what ways? And could you elaborate your answer? So what we can judge obviously, or what we can see obviously, is the fact that the capacity of the community for biological renewal is destroyed through generations. But beside that, what other effects you might deem important will be you think will be important in this transgenerational perspective? When you think about the consequences of genocide transgenerationally?
I think we've talked about how the story of Srebrenica genocide has been neglected over 23 full years by the state, by the elite, let's say, and lately we have been doing serious things, and the same thing applies to survivors. The survivors are a group of people who have been totally neglected by the society, by the state, in terms of all needs, and one of those needs is need for mental health. We are all we are physical human beings, but we are also spiritual human beings, and we need to maintain that spiritual being. So which has been, neglected for 26 years. Survivors haven't been given any psychological services from the state. There were some individual attempts from non-governmental organizations, which actually embraced just tiny groups of survivors, mainly women subjected to sexual violence, Some men who had displayed severe PTSD had to go to, for instance, Tuzla clinic. There is an amazing doctor there, Hasanovic Mevludin, who started to treat the PTSD from 1995, and he has been working on that ever since. He started the EMDR Bosnia, and there is EMDR Association in Tuzla. They're collaborating with the EMDR UK. But these services were given just to a small number of survivors and those who had to go to ask for help when it was almost too late. I know people who died and they never went to, and they never got these psychological services. I know that for many survivors, the biggest problem tonight is how to spend the night, how to survive the night. There are many of them who cannot sleep, who have terrible nightmares, and that trauma is deteriorating by day. They don't know how to and where to and who to talk to, actually, because of social stigma. In our society, if you have any psychological issues, you're being stigmatized as an insane person. So there is this social stigma which we need to work on. I think it's not shame for Srebrenica genocide survivor to display this sort of the issues. So somebody needs to work on with these people and to be out there for them. What we also lack for this particular group of people in Bosnia is the law, which should be enacted by the parliament of the federation. We know that the law should never and will never be enacted on the state level because of all the obstacles and the right of veto by the Serb MPs. But at least in the federation, that law could have been enacted by now, granting some rights for survivors, at least the right for free healthcare. I'm not talking about here about financial compensation or pay for people who, and on the other hand, there are many survivors who don't work, who are unemployed, and that is one thing which only makes their trauma worse, because when you work, it's sort of therapy for you, for your trauma. But if you have both, if you are unemployed and if you have a severe trauma, that even makes it worse. And there are, I would say, many of those survivors who I know personally. So I would really want this issue of PTSD and the right for survivors to get this sort of assistance. I would want that to be more exposed, elaborated in in this country, and maybe it's really, to me, it's not. I don't really understand why some human rights organizations, non-governmental organizations, why they never dealt with these issues. For me, that issue of PTSD is the most important issue for survivors right now as we speak. I don't know if ever that is going to be dealt properly. The same things applies for the transgenerational trauma. Nobody is working with the next generation of their sons, daughters of survivors or victims of genocide. So that is actually another group which is which has been totally neglected. And inevitably, that trauma is going to be passed on that generation, and that the society will see these consequences in future as time go on. And I would encourage your faculty to organize some sort of public events or maybe webinar or some sort of research to deal with these issues, which have been totally neglected also from the academia, if I may say. So there is a lot to think and talk about. There are many books to be written. So why not to write a book about these issues? And I'm sure that there are people who should be interested and who should be educated on these particular issues.
Thank you, Hassan. Yes, I can only agree with you. And maybe, Anne, would you like to add something to this topic of intergenerational trauma from your perspective? Maybe as the insider, we are a bit biased.
I guess the main thing I would add about trauma in general is with intergenerational trauma, or just this cumulative and collective trauma that has happened to so many people in Bosnia, that we don't have in our understanding of trauma and psychology. We don't have a good model to apply to such an extreme situation for individuals with, just cumulative trauma after trauma after trauma, and then collectively, because what happens in a society where the helpers, or even the people who typically would be able to sort of help, are also impacted by this. And so I think that, we certainly know about individual treatment for PTSD. We know about some sort of other interventions, but I think we need to really look at understanding and developing a better model for a broader system where the entire community is impacted somehow. So that's another thing we need to do.
Yes, thank you.
I would just like to ask you, Sanela, what actually, how many minutes do we have left?
Sorry, once again. We have around 20 minutes. I asked our IT manager to prolong our conversation, so we are still good at time.
Okay, but since we have our audience with us, maybe somebody has a question for Hassan and Anne.
Maybe just to share with Hassan and Anne, there is another colleague of us, Nermina Mujagic, who has written extensively on the issues. So maybe she would also like to give a comment, even though she didn't read the book.
I know Nermina, I've met Nermina, so I know Nermina.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sanela, to give me opportunity to say something, and thank you, Hassan, and to introduce your book. Unfortunately, I haven't yet read the book, but I'm looking forward to do as soon as possible. I would like to ask you to share your opinion about justice, because I believe there is no way to think about reconciliation without justice. Justice is a minimum required for any attempts for reconciliation, building ethnic truth between people. Also, I would like to ask you, maybe my question will be so simply, but do you believe does official recognize witnesses' personal story help justice, or some kind of justice, and establish the truth? Thank you so much.
Okay, when Anne mentioned the film Kovadi Saida, from our ordinary perspective, especially from survivors, we wanted everything to be in that film. The film, which is, I assume, less than an hour and a half, and it's not possible. I think the way how the film is made is perfect catch, as Anne said, for the world to hook on the story of Srebrenica. Then afterwards, once people are on, they will, do their own research to be more educated, and this is why the film is so amazing. Secondly, I want to make a point in terms of your question with justice. That was the same thing with justice. At the beginning, we wanted all war criminals to be brought and prosecuted. We wanted it all. And we know that is not how the world functions. Small number of perpetrators, especially those ordinary perpetrators, soldiers, were brought to the ICTY. A number of military and political leaders were put on trial, and a few of those soldiers whose trials were important for the trials of those superiors. So how I understand the ICTY, we expected from the ICTY to bring the whole justice to us, and that was not okay. The ICTY, in my opinion, did all the trials in terms to establish what had happened, knowing that we have different collective memories, narratives of the past, and that judicially established story of Srebrenica and the Bosnian War is absolutely impartial, and it is unbelievable source for the internationals to learn from regarding our tragic past, knowing that there were many genocides in the world who had not been mentioned, who had not been remembered. Just thinking that the Bosnian War, the Srebrenica genocide, will forever be remembered is, to me, gives me a good feeling, good feeling. Of course, I would want all perpetrators to be tried, to be jailed, imprisoned. Of course, I would want that complete justice. But knowing that world is unfair, having what we have been given is makes me actually to feel good, not completely happy, of course. And what is really, I would say, what adds to this topic is the fact that we have the feeling that the war never ended in Bosnia, that the genocide never ended in Srebrenica. It is the still ongoing genocide because we live with its ramifications, with its aftermath. The current mayor of Srebrenica is genocide denier. It is a place where you can meet on daily basis ex-perpetrators. It is a territory of Bosnia where war criminals are being celebrated as heroes, where the story of Srebrenica genocide is being seen as anti-Republic of Srpska story, anti-Serb story. So the fact, Anne was there when Hatija Mehmedovic died, and she was there during the commemoration, and she was able to see, and we talked about this constant endurement of injustice, which is like never-ending injustice. I guess my answer to this is that it's never-ending battle for justice. Maybe even next generation or generation after that generation will have their own battles regarding what we do now. So we have to probably just pause for a moment and think and fight, because nobody will give you your freedom, nobody will give you your justice if, unless you fight for it. And the best example are actually the mothers of Srebrenica, who have been fighting since 1995. I'll just tell you, I'm not going to be long. In Tuzla, it was 1996, first genocide commemoration on the 11th of July in a big sport hall. There were over 10,000 of people inside. They were just women. There was Queen Noor, Emma Bonino, and a few other people, mainly human rights activists, even though Emma Bonino was European Union's commissioner at the time. I was 20. I was 20, I was a teenager, but I was able to see that we were left alone, on our own, as if you would dump something in the street, which is not something that people would want to deal with. That was us. That were the mothers and the children of Srebrenica dumped in that part of Bosnia, and nobody wanted to deal with us. And those women took the initiative, started to speak about the genocide, started to tell their stories, even partnered with some of these amazing women, like there was I quite don't remember the name of the UK ambassador, United States ambassador in Austria, in Vienna, Swanee Hunt, yeah, and they were able, even at the time, to partner with these amazing individuals who helped this story to go out, because we needed, Christiana Amanpour came to Tuzla and she told the story of Srebrenica genocide. And if it wasn't for those mothers, I wonder how the process would go and where this process would go. Would we be here today and talk about this book? And I really don't know. In my opinion, the concept of the international community was to only, that they wanted to bury people in Kladanj. Then the mothers fought and said, no, we want to bury our loved ones in Potocari. And their concept was, okay, you can bury them in Potocari, but you're going only to have the cemetery there, not the memorial. So then they kept fighting with the international community. Then now we have the memorial there. But I think it's because of the responsibility of the international community. They didn't want to have the memorial at the first place there, and the mothers made them to have that. So my point is that it's ongoing battle for justice, and these women, amazing mothers of Srebrenica, from the associations and all mothers. It's not just those mothers from the associations, but also mothers who took care of their children where they lived as refugees without their husbands, with just small money given from the government. They did everything to make sure that children are fed, dressed, go to school, that they are raised well. And this population of people from Srebrenica, we have, I proudly say that our mothers have made it. Because of them, we have unbelievable young people now who are educated, not just in Bosnia, but worldwide, and they are really an amazing example that we can all learn from. And the issue of justice, you can never talk about justice in Bosnia without mentioning these amazing women, and I think they are on the top of their story.
Thank you, Hassan. Nermina, thank you, dear Nermina, for actually your time to be with us. And thank you for your wonderful question. Do you have anything else to add? Because I got a notification from our student, Selma Masic, that she would like to actually pose the question.
Only thanks for both of you, and Hassan, and of course, Serena, Sanala, and Professor Turchula, because you organized this discussion. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, dear Nermina, one more time. Selma, do you hear me?
Yes, I hope you hear me as well.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Good morning again. Well, I have several questions to ask. Some of them are already replied, especially the one regarding the PTSD and the way our institutions dealt with such problem. So when I met actually Hassan and Anne during the times of commemoration, we talked about the books that already exist, and Hassan told me about languages that books are translated to, and as far as I noticed, they're not translated to Bosnian language. And I wanted to ask, do you have any book translated to Bosnian language? And if not, what are obstacles in the processes of translation your books to Bosnian language? And the second question is partly answered, but I need the full answer. When I was in Srebrenica, I had a chance to speak with mothers of Srebrenica, and I wanted to ask them about their sons and about their fathers and about their husbands and brothers. But I never dared to ask them because I was afraid of the potential emotions I might invoke and the way how I will deal with it. So I had obviously the obstacle to talk with people who were victims of Srebrenica genocides and similar events. So you actually had to make people talk and to talk with victims. And I wanted to ask, how did you deal with the obstacle I have? And I feel like you also had them, because Hassan once mentioned that some people said that they actually thought they won't survive storytelling. So I just wanted to ask for some sort of advice how to deal with such a problem.
I think the best way to approach to this in this and to actually act in this situation is to just introduce yourself, and I'm sure with your how you speak now to us, if you just use that tone and that attitude towards us, the mothers, everyone would understand your goodwill and your kindness and your interest, and I'm sure that everyone would want to share their stories with you, especially taking into the account your age, and especially when we see that the young people have interest in knowing the story, then we would share even details that maybe in some other situations we would not want to share with somebody who is maybe our age or who is older. But we are in a way weak when it comes to people like you, young students, because I think the future is you. You are the future, our future, and we have to have young people like you who will be able to carry on this story of not just Srebrenica genocide, but the siege of Sarajevo, Prijedor, and other war crimes in Bosnia. And we need to cultivate this culture of remembrance to the rest of our lives, and till you know, we exist here in the Balkans, I would say. You should never be afraid. And that's my answer. You know, to talk to mothers, to talk to survivors, because it's about the heart and the feeling. You know, and so we feel, and we basically we know it's difficult to explain. You know, with words. But I'm sure that they would love you. You know, and open their hearts and talk to you.
Thank you very much. This is really encouraging.
Dear colleague Selma, your question is also encouraging. And do you have anything to add maybe, or shall I wrap it up, because we are actually very close to the end of this session?
I would just like to say one thing about that, in terms of Selma's question, that from my point of view, it's always important that we ask ourselves, why do we want to know somebody's story? What is our motivation? Who might it help? Who might it hurt? Those sorts of questions. And that we always, in whatever way we can, establish some sort of very authentic relationship with somebody before we have a conversation that might involve their story. And that can happen very quickly, or that can take a long time. So I guess I think those things are important to remember.
Okay, thank you. I've got nothing to add. Thanks everyone. And actually some sort of enjoyed of this meeting and this book promotion and hearing all those questions and answers.
Thank you, Selma, one more time. Well, what can I say on the end? To say thank you to our institution, Faculty of Political Science, University of Sarajevo, to our dean who actually make this possible. And this book Voices of Srebrenica, is already even published recently, a really significant contribution on cultural memory, on thoughts and issues on trauma, on intergeneration trauma, on what Hassan and my dear colleague Nermina underlined, PTSD, then questions on justice, culture of denial also, and most of all, these extraordinary human stories and human dramas that touch everybody so deeply, everybody who read this book. As Hasan Hasanovic is here, let me one more time say that I directly read how much important is the institutional form of cultural remembrance, of new thoughts, new ideas on how to work on this, because Bosnia and Herzegovina society is very, very young on this issue. I would like to thank Anna for your academic, but mostly human willingness to spread the truth about Srebrenica genocide. And I'm thanking you for the love you showed in the book for Bosnia and Herzegovina and Bosnia and Herzegovina's people. And we all know that Srebrenica genocide actually marked lives of everybody here, and it will still mark it. But also it underlined actually our, at least we all are here together at this particular moment, this human path that Anna also showed to us, the moral principles on humanity, and that these atrocities and genocide actually never happen again. This is our obligation as a human being. And thank you, Hassan, for doing everything what you do. And thank you for being who you are. And thank you all, and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we also hope that next year we will gather in person and do something together.
Yes,
Let's
absolutely.
hope.
Let's hope.
Stay
Absolutely.
healthy and see you soon.
Thank you, Sanela, Sarina,
Thank you.
Sead,
Thank you so much.
Selma,
And looking forward to see you
Elena,
soon.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.